Welcome back to The Explainer. We are currently living right in the middle of one of the most massive economic and societal shifts in modern history. The rapid integration of AI, well, it's not just some passing tech trend. It is fundamentally rewriting the rules of the entire workforce, and honestly, wealth generation as a whole. So today, we're cutting through the noise and breaking down the real data and the core debates driving this whole revolution.
To perfectly set the stage for what we're talking about today, I want to share this incredibly insightful and honestly pretty funny quote from a recent broadcast panel on AI. One of the analysts said, "It wasn't the horses that lost their jobs to the car, it was horses that didn't learn how to drive." You know, it gets a laugh, but it absolutely hits the nail on the head. Surviving and thriving in this new AI era is entirely about adaptation. Think back to when the automobile first arrived. It completely upended transportation. But that disruption wasn't just about the new machinery itself. It was really about who adapted to use it and, well, who got left in the dust.
And that brilliant little analogy perfectly illustrates our core concept for today: adaptation. See, the main takeaway from all the analysts isn't that AI is going to just wake up one day and replace every human worker across the board. The real truth is much simpler. People who use AI are going to replace the people who stubbornly refuse to adapt to it. We have to make this essential shift from, resisting this technological displacement to actually grabbing these new AI tools and using them to boost our own relevance in the workforce. Just like when the internet or ATMs first showed up, fighting the tech almost never works. Integrating it into your daily workflow, that's what secures your future.
So, let's get into Section 1, Degrees versus Tech Skills.
This desperate need for adaptation is already completely disrupting what we used to expect from the job market. Get this. According to the broadcast data, college graduates currently make up a staggering 25% of the unemployed population. 25%! These are folks whose degrees historically would have guaranteed them a massive, easy head start in their careers, and yet they're the ones really taking the brunt of the hit right now.
And what makes that 25% figure even more shocking is exactly who these graduates are. Even people with degrees in historically super secure, highly sought-after fields, we're talking finance, computer science, information sciences, they're seriously struggling to find entry-level work right now. It's a pretty harsh irony. Having a traditional white-collar degree, yes, even in tech or finance, is just no longer a magic shield against unemployment if you aren't actively weaving the latest AI capabilities into your personal skill set.
We are seeing a really stark contrast play out here. Traditional college-educated individuals are dealing with incredibly high anxiety, while high school graduates who are moving straight into blue-collar, hands-on roles, they're actually faring much, much better. Why is that? Well, because a lot of those hands-on, physical jobs aren't exactly things an AI can do at this exact moment. So the whole script has flipped. A decade ago, blue-collar workers were constantly being told to learn to code to survive the global market. Now, it's those white-collar coders and analysts feeling the immediate, intense pressure to adapt to AI.
Which brings us to Section 2, Job Losses and New Industries.
If we zoom out and look at the broader corporate landscape, there is a very real, widespread anxiety about mass restructuring. Just recently, the chief executive of Standard let go of 8,000 people. 8,000. And the reason given? The CEO cited the replacement of low-valued human capital with artificial intelligence. Now, even though that executive later tried to kind of walk back that really harsh phrasing, the damage was done. It sparked immense political and social anxiety. Because honestly, if a top corporate leader can view human workers simply as low-valued capital that you can just swap out for an algorithm, well, that perfectly illustrates the ruthless, bottom-line reality of how corporations are adopting AI.
But okay, before we completely panic, let's juxtapose that harsh corporate reality with the broader global outlook. If we look at the World Economic Forum's 2030 projections, yes, they do predict that 92 million jobs will be lost globally. That's a huge number. But crucially, they also project that 170 million brand new jobs are going to be created. Historically speaking, every single industrial revolution eliminates some roles while creating a whole bunch of new ones. So the projection actually shows a massive net gain of opportunities overall.
However, despite that projected net gain of millions of jobs, immense public anxiety definitely still remains. The analyst on the panel rightly pointed out that the really big question isn't just if new jobs will be created, but rather, where are they going to be physically located? Will these shiny new industries and tech jobs stay here in America, or are they going to shift overseas to places like India or China? It's exactly this uncertainty about where these new cars are going to be built, so to speak, that's driving a ton of our current workforce anxiety.
Moving on to Section 3, the AI wealth generation boom. So,
pivoting away from employment anxiety for a second, let's look at the other side of the coin. NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang explicitly refers to this exact era as the fourth industrial revolution, and he has a highly optimistic perspective. He predicts that AI is going to generate so much wealth that there will be tons of new opportunity for everyone to share. The core argument here is that this massive technological leap will fundamentally expand the size of the economic pie entirely, rather than just carving up the existing pie into smaller, more competitive pieces.
And I've got to say, the wealth currently being generated is absolutely staggering. Analysts are noting that at the very, very top of the market, wealth has climbed an astonishing 3,000%. 3,000! It is creating new fortunes overnight that would honestly make the old robber barons blush. But importantly, the broadcast data also backs up the claim that overall household wealth across the board has seen a real increase over this same period. So the boom isn't entirely isolated to the billionaires. It's lifting financial metrics broadly, even if the absolute top tier is pulling away at rocket speed.
So what does this insane level of wealth generation actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like migration. A massive $39.2 billion in net worth has recently moved directly into Florida's ecosystem. That is largely being driven by tech executives and business leaders who are relocating specifically to take advantage of the state's very business-friendly environment. It's an authentic, massive, physical shift of wealth happening right inside the country.
And this is a perfect example of how rapid tech wealth just completely reshapes local economies. The real estate experts from the panel detailed the very tangible ripple effects hitting Florida right now. To put it in perspective, we are talking about $4 million in net worth arriving in the state every single hour. Last year alone, there were 361 home sales above the $10 million mark. That is basically one ultra-luxury mansion being sold every single day of the year. And because all these executives are bringing their families and their whole teams down with them, local infrastructure is just totally overwhelmed. There are literally 2 to 3 year waiting lists right now just to get kids into private schools. This wealth boom is completely transforming the local landscape.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, the debate over regulation.
As you might expect, this level of rapid technological change and insane wealth accumulation has triggered a pretty fierce societal tug-of-war. On one side, there's a really growing push, which we've seen echoed by public figures like Jon Stewart, calling for the government to step in and heavily regulate or even nationalize these AI companies. On the exact opposite side, critics are pushing back incredibly hard. They argue that those kinds of moves would just create a massive censorship industrial complex, encumber regular Americans with heavy-handed big government, and ultimately stifle the exact innovation that's driving our economy forward right now.
Let's actually look a little closer at the argument for oversight. Proponents of strict regulation make a really interesting point. They argue that these massive AI models are fundamentally being trained using our public data. So their argument essentially boils down to, hey, these companies are taking all of our human data to train themselves, and then they're turning around and using that exact same tech to displace us in the workforce. For them, this raises some pretty massive ethical questions about corporate ownership of public knowledge and the absolute need to protect workers from just being discarded. Furthermore, this whole debate ties directly into how we, as a society, are supposed to handle massive wealth generation. You have some politicians in states like New York calling for heavy taxation on billionaires to redistribute that wealth and support the public. Conversely, critics of that approach issue a very stark warning. They argue that anti-business policies simply drive the wealthy right out of the state, exactly like we just saw with that massive $39 billion migration down to Miami. And when they leave, they drain the local tax base that's desperately needed to fund essential things like schools and roads. So it really is this incredibly delicate, high-stakes balance between protecting the public and fostering the ecosystem that creates the wealth in the first place.
And that brings us to the end of today's explainer, leaving us with a pretty critical question to ponder. We've looked at the real data on job displacement, we've seen the incredible wealth being generated, and we've explored the fierce debates over how to manage it all. But, on an individual level, the reality remains exactly the same as it was a century ago. As this AI revolution accelerates, are you just going to stand on the sidewalk watching the cars go by, or are you actively learning how to drive? I really hope this structured look helped clarify the massive shifts happening around us right now. Keep learning, keep adapting, and I'll see you in the next explainer.